if the Bills want to compete and finally reach the Super Bowl in 2026, they have to get some reinforcements. And a lot of those reinforcements are going to come through the 2025 NFL Draft. So after the Super Bowl has concluded and the Philadelphia Eagles are your champions, we thought we would come at you with Mock Draft 2.0, the post-Super Bowl 7-round mock draft here on the Bills Breakdown by Chat Sports. I'm your host, Tyler Smith. And before we get into this full 7-round mock, got to ask you guys, Bills Mafia, who is your favorite Bills draft pick of all time? I'm expecting a lot of 17s down in the comment section, but let me know if you've been watching the Bills for a super long time. Who is the best Bills draft pick ever? All right, Bills Mafia, here we go. 7-round mock draft 2.0 here on the channel. And I thought that what the Bills are going to need if they want to compete in the AFC next year, they have to get instant contributors and guys who can play on day one and fill positions of need, as they do have a lot of free agents and they're not in the best cap space situation heading into 2025 NFL free agency. So I took that all into account when making this 2025 mock, and let's get into it. First, let's show you guys what picks the Bills have on the board. And I really do think the Bills have a great depth of draft selections at this moment. Pick number 30. Near the end of round one, obviously losing in the AFC Championship will get you right there. 56 overall via the Minnesota Vikings, and I think this is the Stephon Diggs trade still reaping its head on the Bills draft selections here. We have 62 overall in round two, 107 heading into round four, so no third-round picks for the Bills, as well as pick 130. And then you have some comp picks coming up in round 5 for Gabe Davis for pick 171 and Leonard Floyd for pick 174. 177 coming from the Giants. I think that's in the Boogie Basham trade. And then 179 from Cleveland and 206. 3 6th-round picks to round things out. You see those comp picks for Gabe Davis and Leonard Floyd. And as far as what the Bills are going to need to address in this 2025 draft, defensive line is huge. If we've learned anything about the formula that the Eagles used to go out there and win the Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs, is that you need to get pressure on Patrick Mahomes and make him uncomfortable. They did it by rushing forward, didn't blitz once, so the Bills are going to need a very stacked defensive line heading into next year. Wide receiver, Josh needs more weapons. Let's be completely honest. I mean, he was working with B-level receivers at best, and Amari Cooper never really became a featured player for Buffalo. Cornerback, you have some free agents in that department. We'll discuss the depth chart at CB later on in today's video, but they didn't have the best drafting situation, with Kyer Elam a couple of years ago. They might need to replace him. They might need to get somebody who can play day one, as Rasul Douglas is a free agent. Linebacker as well. You got some guys who are getting a little bit old there. I know everybody loves Matt Milano, but at the end of the day, his best days might be behind him, and he's faced a ton of injuries over the last couple of years, and it might be in Buffalo's best interest financially to cut ties with Milano. So linebacker could be another spot that Buffalo needs to address. Brandon Beane in the draft. So before we get into the second round of the 2025 NFL Draft, the Giants called us up. Joe Shane, Brian Dable, our old friends here in the 716, they called us up and said, hey, we want to move a couple slots up to pick 30. And I said, you know what? Why don't we get a couple more darts to throw at the board? Brandon Beane has not been the best draft selector in the first round over the past couple of years, at least of recent. You look back to 2018, and 2019 when you pick up Ed Oliver and Josh Allen. Those are great first-round picks, but those are also kind of slam dunk picks. You needed a quarterback at least in the Josh draft. I know he was an unproven commodity, but that's how it all went. So let's go get more darts to throw at the board and get pick 34, move 6 picks down into round 2, and then a 4th-round pick, another pick around the top 100 of this draft, pick 103. So the Bills get, I now think, 6 picks in the top 107. It's going to be a good selection and get them a good opportunity to get some instant impact players. And let's start with round 2. Pick 34 selection, coming with Donovan Ezeiruaku from Boston College. An instant impact edge rusher who is a freak athlete. He put up a ton of ridiculous numbers at BC last year. 16.5 sacks for him in 12 games, and he was pressuring the quarterback like no other. 60 pressures on the season. He was active as well. Like a lot of the times you'll see different pass rushers just not be an impact player in the run game and having these pure tackle numbers. But Ezeiruaku, he's got him down. And the biggest authority on the NFL draft, in my opinion, Dane Brugler, had a very good thing to say about Ezeiruaku here. He said, Ezeiruaku is more of a dip and rip than a force player as a pass rusher because of his natural feel for depth points and the different ways he uses jab steps and cross chops to soften the corner. He ranked top 3 in the FBS this season in both sacks, 16.5, and tackles for loss, 20.5. And if the Bills aren't going to make a big trade for, say, a Myles Garrett or a Michael Parsons or any pass rusher that's on the block this offseason, you're going to need to go get something early in the draft, something that you can feel confident in yourself putting on that line of scrimmage, because the Von Miller experience is likely over. They're going to cut him for financial flexibility. Is Greg Rousseau going to take that massive step that we all see? Is A.J. Epinesa going to be able to be a guy who you start day in and day out? You got to take another shot on this position, and Ezeiruaku is no doubt a production-heavy guy out of the ACC, and hopefully he can produce for Buffalo if they do select him at pick 34. But if you don't want to go edge rusher pick 1, if you think there's a bigger need for Buffalo at that pick, in my opinion, is you got to look to be at the defensive line or at the wide receiver spot and go best talent available between those two. But what do you guys think? What position should the Bills target with their first pick in the 2025 NFL Draft? Let me know down in the comments section. I decided to stick on the defensive line for the next pick in round 2, 56 overall, and go with Darius Alexander, the Senior Bowl standout from Toledo. And, you know, I do think the Bills need a little bit more depth on the interior of their defensive line here. And you know what? For a guy who's playing his best ball and really coming along closer and closer as we get to the draft, I feel like taking a swing here on a guy that maybe not a lot of people saw enough film on during the regular season. Dane Brugler says this about Alexander. Despite being part of a loaded defensive line group in the Senior Bowl, Alexander was able to shine brightest, putting himself in the mix to be a second-round pick. He has loose body control as a 3 and a 4 pounder, and his play activity and toughness show both on the interior and when rushing off of the edge. So a versatile defensive lineman, and that's good because I think he can play in a lot of different spots on this Bills defensive line. Who knows if A.J. Epinesa is going to be a long-term solution at that right DN spot. Greg Rousseau, he showed flashes, but is he ever going to be a top-end guy? And then you got to look at Daquan Jones as somebody who I just don't think is a top-end player. And I think you have to have an elite player at all 4 of these positions if you want to compete with Kansas City and expose their biggest weakness, which is protecting Patrick Mahomes. Get another body in here and somebody who is playing his best ball closer and closer to the draft. I think he's absolutely worthy of a day 2 pick. It looks like he solidified that for himself with his Senior Bowl performance, and he could be a great addition to a Buffalo defensive line that, let's be honest, just needs a couple more bodies. So the Bills will not be picking at pick 62 in the second round, and I made that decision because the 49ers called up. John Lynch said, listen, we're going to give you more depth and more picks inside the top 100 if you guys can give us some depth on the back end of this draft where we make our magic. You know what? I said that it works best for both parties. We'll see you in the Super Bowl, John. Bills moving up for 2 picks in the third round of this draft, 75 and 99. So, without further ado, that's the next pick the Bills are on the clock for. Let's dive right into it. And we're finally addressing that wide receiver position and going with Isaiah Bond, a player who was kind of in the national spotlight all season long, but missed a couple of, was hampered by an injury. Didn't miss any time this season, but you could clearly tell that often he was not the same player that we saw in 2023 with Alabama, when he really broke out and had 4 touchdowns, was a 14-yard-to-catch guy. Like, he just didn't see the volume that he got at Texas this season. And that was also a stacked receiver room as well, and there was inconsistency at the quarterback position there. So I feel like we didn't really see the full potential of Isaiah Bond, but everybody knows how good of an athlete that he can be and how much potential that this guy has. He's probably one of the biggest wild cards in this draft, but he has high boom and high bust potential. I think the Bills could be willing to kind of make that decision and go after a guy like that if they make a big splash at wide receiver in free agency or via trade. Would you draft Isaiah Bond, though? Is that somebody that you guys are interested in? He got a lot of national spotlight this year, but the production didn't really match up to the hype. Let me know down in the comment section. Type Y for yes or type N for no on whether or not you would draft the Texas wide receiver. Let's stick in Austin, Texas at UT and go to the defensive backfield and get Andrew Mukuba, an all-around ball hawk safety at pick 99. The Bills have a ton of cavalry now here in the top 100 of the draft, and right before pick 100, Andrew Mukuba is the selection. He can play at multiple levels of the defense, whether you're talking about him being that safety valve over the top or get him in the box as somebody who can make a bunch of really big tackles and secure tackles, or you could play him in the nickel spot as well and have him man up on some different players in passing situations. I like Andrew Mukuba a lot. The one knack on him is the size and the frame. 6'1", 190 isn't exactly a Brian Dawkins level of athlete or physical stature here, but he puts up a bunch of numbers, man. 5 interceptions this season, broke up a bunch of passes, and he could be a player that makes a big-time difference, as Micah Hyde did just retire, and the Bills are going to be looking at another safety to add to the room this offseason. Stick in the defensive backfield again. Let's go with Kobe Bryant, a guy who got another guy who got a lot of hype heading into the 2024 NCAA season. And this was the best corner on the board. And I think the Bills need to pick up a corner in this draft. We talked about it before, man. Like they take Kyrie Elam a couple of years ago, and he just hasn't been the level of producer that you wanted him to be for Buffalo's defense right now. And you know what? For Kobe Bryant, somebody who's a really good athlete, somebody who has kind of transformed a Kansas defense that has looked really a lot better over recent years. I like him a lot, and he's put up a bunch of big-time numbers. 11 PBUs this season. There's not a quarterback rating of under 63. Like, that's really, really solid as well. Under a little bit over a 50% completion rate. Not too bad there. And only allowed 400 yards this season. Only 2 touchdowns. Like, he's pretty shut down on the outside, and that's where he would play for Buffalo, in my opinion. Here's what Dane Brugler had to say on Bryant. Bryant barely tops 170 pounds. That's probably the knack on him after a good meal, but he rarely gets punked by size on the field. He's a quick read-react athlete and plays with the complete skills that will speak to an NFL coach. And if you look at what Buffalo has going on at the cornerback position right now, like I mentioned earlier, Russell Douglas is getting older, and he's a free agent. I don't know if Buffalo is going to be willing to play a guy of his stature and his position in the league right now as the CB1 heading into next season with all the receiving talent that there is in the AFC. And why don't you add another guy who people thought was pro ready before this season? They were already pegging him to be a first-round corner, and you know what? He fell a little bit, maybe because of the frame and not getting much bigger in this most recent season. But I think he could contribute right away to this Bills defense. Like he is a read and react player. He's somebody that understands how routes are run and can really make impact and have high production in the pass breakup and turning the ball over department. Like he is a very good player, and you know, playing in the Big 12, there's going to be a ton of offenses. There's going to be a ton of big plays, and he did a really good job limiting that this season. For more mock drafts this year, though, we are going to be covering the Bills draft like no other on YouTube, so make sure you are subscribed to the channel. The channel's growing like crazy. We passed over 1,000 subscribers. We're on the road to 2K now, so if you're a diehard Bills fan, if you're a member of the Mafia, hit that red sub button, and let's get on with this draft. All right, heading into round 4 right now, we go with Barrett Carter. And what's the downside in taking a linebacker out of Clemson? They usually end up producing in the NFL. And at pick 107, I think this is a great selection. Another guy who puts up a ton of big numbers and does it at multiple levels as well. Can get to the quarterback and can be somebody who's used as a blitzer, and we all know those Clemson linebackers are uber athletic. Also can play a little bit in the pass game as well. That was kind of the knock on him this season. Didn't end up recording an interception. Kind of got cooked as opposed to how he played in that department in 2022 and 2023. But he's got a lot of things that you can like about Carter. He's a sideline-to-sideline linebacker. Like he can get across the field and get lateral like very quickly. He's got good eye discipline and route recognition, so he is able to play that pass, no doubt about it. And the Bills are going to need another coverage linebacker if they do move on from Matt Milano. And he's physical at the point of attack. He can make the big hit and make the big plays, and that could always return for more turnovers for a Bills defense that we could argue needs to force more next season. Now, there are some things that you don't necessarily love about him. That's why he's getting taken at pick 107. He's not going to be a perfect prospect. He's undersized a little bit as a 6'1 linebacker. You might want somebody a little bit bigger than that. But at the end of the day, there's undersized linebackers all the time that really work out well in this league. Just look at Bobby Wagner. He's a Hall of Famer. Tackling technique can improve, and he's a little inconsistent in locating the ball on coverage. That's the knack on him in the pass game, but I think that can be only improved upon once he gets to the NFL. That's something you can absolutely work on and improve. Next up, sticking in round 4, pick 130, Tyler Barron out of Miami. This is another player who I just thought was the best guy available at this spot, and I think the Bills need to get more edge rushers on this team. You have to be able to get to Patrick. He is the boogeyman, and you need another guy who can get to him. 5.5 sacks this year, a 6'5", just massive human being, 260. Like, this is a brute force out here, and I think, somebody who's can get to Patrick Mahomes and can bully different offensive linemen on the outside. Sign me up to add more of those guys to this Buffalo defense. What about a running back in round 5, pick 174, Taj Brooks out of Texas Tech? Somebody who can affect the game in a bunch of different ways. Is an underrated receiving back, but he's really a big-time bruiser. Over 5 yards a carry this season, 1,500 total yards on the ground. And then he added 200 yards in the pass game as well. 18 touchdowns, so he can find the paint, and he was somebody that Texas Tech went to often to be a big source of their offense. Maybe with different running backs like the Buffalo has in this room, kind of more agile guys, smaller guys, you get a big-time bruiser in that running back room. Taj Brooks is a guy who had a lot of production in the Big 12. What about round 6, where we go to another linebacker? Like I said, we're trying to fill positions that Buffalo is going to lack in when this season is coming around, and that's cornerback, wide receiver, and linebacker and D-line. And we're kind of going heavy on those positions in this draft. And why don't we take a guy out of the Big Ten, a secure tackler in Jay Higgins, in the 6th round at pick 177. Let's round things out with another corner. More depth, more depth, more depth. And I thought Jalen Smith was the best guy available here at pick 179 at a USC. USC had an underrated defense this year. And you know what? Smith was a big part of it. Their pass defense ranked pretty high in the Big Ten. So we'll see if he could be a contributor and take a late round flyer in round 6. Grade this mock draft for me, A, B, C, D, or F. Get out your red pens and let me know what you think is Bills' 7-round mock draft. We are getting closer and closer to the NFL draft, and the coverage is only going to increase and improve. So make sure you are subscribed to the channel. YouTube.com/Bills News will be at you guys with another video, maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day. We are giving you guys as much daily Bills content as we can all offseason long. So lock us in as your #1 source for Bills content on YouTube.